What's a creepy fact you wish you never learned? Story 1 commented this before. But if you have abdominal surgery and the surgeon needs your intestines out of the way, they don't try to get them back in exactly as they were. They can put them in pretty much any old way, and they sort themselves out. Then freaked out even more when someone else commented that you can quite often feel them wriggling themselves back into position. You can feel that tingling feeling after giving birth, too. Felt like I was all jello in my abdomen, would feel a wiggle and like a slipping sensation. It didn't hurt. The part that hurt was when they come in and do that abdomen rub to push the blood out of you for your uterus to contract back. That felt like pure torture. Story 2. The Byford Dolphin Incident. Specifically, what happened to the one diver as the pod instantly decompressed, causing his body to get sucked through a few inch crescent gap by literal tons of pressure. His remains ejected from the pod onto the deck, an empty skin sack with mangled bones, some limbs severed completely from his body. His organs were described as perfectly intact and removed from his torso. His head turned to mush. Some parts were never recovered, thought to have launched into the sea. A horrific mortal combat-like fatality, near instantaneous. I'm relieved knowing it was extremely quick, but it haunts me to imagine the last moment of this man's life, or the scene post-mortem. The autopsy report and images of the disaster, along with his images, have been released to the public. Tread lightly. Story 3. My father's school did a guided tour through the woods, searching and learning about local herbs. A few years later, when my father was still a child, the police showed up and asked him if he recognized the man in a picture that they showed him. My father explained that he was the herbalist tour guide. Apparently, the guy had murdered several boys and had my father's name and address in his car. The police had caught the guy by this point. I think he killed himself or died in suspicious circumstances. Story 4. Your brain chooses to ignore your nose. If it didn't, you would notice it from your point of view constantly. You only see it from your point of view when you want to see it. In addition to this, the veins in your eyeballs cast shadows into your vision. But because this is never new information, since they're always on the same spot, your brain omits it from view. But you can trick yourself into seeing them by making a pinhole with your fingers and looking at a bright spot, like the sky, or a white monitor and wiggling your hand around. This moves the shadows around, making it new info. Story 5. Carl Tanzler fell in love with Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos, a young tuberculosis patient at the Key West Hospital where he was a radiology technician. But his fondness grew into an obsession after she died in 1931. Tanzler lived with the corpse of the woman he loved for 7 years. When she started to decompose, he embalmed her body and stuffed her with cotton wool. When she was eventually discovered, he was asked at his trial if he ever consummated their relationship. He said no, but stuff was found in the cotton wool of her bathing suit area. Story 6. Naegleria fowleri. I now have a somewhat irrational fear of ponds or lakes. For people that want to know what it is, Naegleria fowleri, also known as the brain-eating amoeba, is a species of the genus Naegleria. It belongs to the phylum Percolozoa and is technically classified as an amoeboflagellate excavate rather than a true amoeba. This free-living microorganism primarily feeds on bacteria, but can become pathogenic in humans, causing an extremely rare, sudden, severe, and usually fatal brain infection known as naegleriosis, or primary amoebic meningoencephalitis, PAM. It is typically found in warm, freshwater bodies such as lakes, rivers, hot springs, warm water discharged from industrial or power plants, geothermal well water, and poorly maintained or minimally chlorinated swimming pools with residual chlorine levels under 0.5 milligrams per cubic meter, water heaters, soil, and pipes connected to tap water. It can exist in either an amoeboid or temporary flagellate stage. Story 7. Vacuum decay. Theoretically, if some quantum tunneling event occurs in deep space, it can sort of unmake the physical laws of the universe, and it will just stop. This effect will spread out at superluminal speeds. This can occur in the same way a shadow can move faster than light, or the expansion of the universe itself can move faster than light. These dead areas are also invisible, as they, by their very nature, emit no radiation, absorb any that ventures in, and move so fast. The only way you know one was coming was that all the stars near you would all blink out in a matter of weeks. Vacuum decay is a terrifying concept. Fortunately, the jury is still out on whether it's actually possible, with most physicists agreeing that it's at least extremely unlikely. And if it is possible, then the chances of it actually happening within the timescale of the life of the universe are likely to be vanishingly thin. Our understanding of physics and the universe is constantly evolving, though, so no one can say anything for sure. Story 8. There's this that I heard one time. If you feel like you're being watched by someone, you probably are. Now, I can't help but think about how that feeling occurs similarly to observing a quantum particle. The particle reacts to being watched or touched. And since we have a bunch of those particles in our atoms, in our cells, in our organs, in our bodies, we can literally feel like we're being watched with every fiber of our being. Story 9. Most people do not know one of the reasons why AC electricity can kill you. In order to generate electricity, the power companies spin a magnet inside a coil of wire, or spin a coil around a magnet. The angular frequency that the coil or magnet is spun at is about 50 hertz to 60 hertz. More than 30 milliampere of AC, root mean square 60 hertz, or 300 to 500 milliampere of DC at high voltage can cause fibrillation, irregular heartbeat. Basically, AC current goes back and forth really fast and can pump your heart for your brain instead. Your brain thinks something else is pumping the heart for it, so it stops. Once you let go of the object you're being electrocuted by, the brain doesn't clue in to pump the heart again because it thought something else was doing it. Scary, very scary. Story 10. In the Meteor apocalypse movies, it usually starts by some random research team discovering the meteor by accident, then figuring out it's headed for Earth. That's pretty much what we have to hope for. Those rocks are fast, like faster than you can imagine. In movies, it's this huge ball of fire that tears through the atmosphere in some cinematic masterpiece that allows the people below to see how messed up they are. That's not true in real life. In real life, it goes from the edge of our atmosphere to the Earth in less than a second. It hits the Earth so hard it will vaporize the ground it touches and itself, hitting with such force that the ground moves like you threw a boulder into a lake. Waves of Earth become fluid and destroy everything in a massive flux of destruction. But what's really scary is that it's cold. It's cold until it hits some type of atmosphere from a planet or space body. Because it's cold, it's hard to detect with just pointing instruments into space. Unless we are specifically looking for it, we won't see it. We won't know that we're about to all die. We won't know that a meteor is about to hit us until we see a literal tsunami of Earth outside our window about to kill us. That's why movies have people discovering it by accident, because the chances of us finding it on purpose are not good. Add on, this has gotten a bunch of attention, and I do see some people freaking. There is some good news in regards to this. Thanks to the sheer age of the solar system and the universe, a lot of the stuff that could have hit us has already hit us, or hit something before us. Moon craters, not just for our moon, show the impact of previous asteroids. Planets have already been bombarded by the stuff floating about, so while the chances aren't zero, they are fairly low. Also, we are a really small planet, literally a pale blue dot, even before you leave the solar system, and damn near invisible once you leave the solar system. Story 11. Not a fact for everyone, but a fact for me. I didn't know mussels still spasm after death. When I went to buy chicken, the butcher killed the chicken in front of me and started hacking away at the meat. He placed it in a bag and handed it to me. And on the way to my vehicle, I felt something moving, and I looked at my hand to realize the bag was moving. I dropped the bag at the light speed and stared at it until it stopped moving, and then went back to the butcher. He laughed at me, but I learned something new that day. Story 12. More than you bargained for. Bedbugs reproduce solely through a process known as traumatic insemination, also known as hypodermic insemination, in which the male pierces the female's abdomen with his adeagus and injects his sperm through the wound into her abdominal cavity. The process is detrimental to the female's health. It creates an open wound that impairs the female until it heals and is susceptible to infection. The injection of sperm and ejaculatory fluids can also trigger an immune reaction in the female. Although traumatic insemination is not limited to male-female couplings, or even couplings of the same species, and both homo and interspecies traumatic inseminations have been observed. These bugs are ninja-like night-stalking vampires that exist solely to drain your blood and trauma each other into every next generation. Due to the advent of electric heat in the 1930s, their population saw a boom, and by the 1950s, they were in one of every 3 houses in the USA. Then, DDT became a popular chemical treatment, which brought them closer and closer to extinction here. By the 1970s, they were only in 1 of every 1,000 houses. However, due to the banning of DDT, they saw a comeback. Nowadays, everyone in 5 homes in the USA has or will have an infestation this year. According to professionals, 92% of the time, the first indication that you have them are the welts from the bites that you receive. They are very hard to catch in the act, ninja-like, although not everyone reacts to their bites the same way. Some people do not get the welts, and so will live with and be the sole food source for an infestation, and not even have the slightest indication that they are there. Story 13. There are at least two species of plants that eat mammals. One of them is native to California. The jumping cholla grows in such a way that vibrations from large nearby creatures walking past can break the weak stems of the plant, causing the cacti buds to fall over and pierce the skin of the animal. The spines of the cholla are like arrowheads on a microscopic level, causing them to get stuck fast into the animal's skin. Over time, the open wounds hinder the movement of the animal and begin to fester, eventually leading to starvation or predation or infection, and a dead body full of moisture for the young cholla buds to grow with. The other plant, the puya, is known as the sheep eater. Its thorns have possibly evolved to get tangled with alpaca wool, trapping the beasts and waiting for them to die of thirst, so that their bodies provide nutrients to the plant. Story 14. Two things about the human mind. First, there's the myth of freedom of choice. Our brain is basically just a big, ongoing chemical and physical reaction. The only reason we don't know the outcome is because we don't know the starting point. Your decision to get a burrito on your way to work is not more your own than water deciding to boil into steam. Second, how our memories are physical structures. Every time you remember something, you basically disassemble the structure and then put it back together. Imagine doing this with a Lego set a few times without instructions. We get copying errors all over the place. Also, the reforming process can be hampered by a choice of a few antibiotics, though only when injected into your skull. It's used to treat the most terrible cases of PTSD. Inject the patient. Talk about the traumatizing event. Wait, repeat. Every time you do it, the memory becomes more hazy and uncouples from the emotional side of things. Story 15. There's a rare genetic disorder that, luckily, fairly few people have, called fatal familial insomnia. The gene is passed down in families with the genetic mutation, and one doesn't know whether it will affect them until it is triggered. No one knows what triggers it yet. However, it is usually triggered by the age of 60. Once triggered, the person essentially can never sleep again, causing a rapid degeneration of the brain and body, with effects such as loss of sight, weight, and eventually the ability to walk and speak properly, as well as hallucinations and dementia. And eventually, within 6 months, they will die, and there is nothing they can do about it. Story 16. I experienced malignant narcissism firsthand, having had a narcissistic mother which led to trauma bonds with other narcissists. Over 2 decades, 3 malignant narcissists in my work life subjected me to coordinated bullying and abuse, both in and out of the workplace. Malignant narcissism combines the traits of narcissistic personality disorder with antisocial behavior, paranoia, and aggression, leading to highly destructive behavior. Early on, I ignored the abuse, which only worsened the situation. If you encounter a malignant narcissist, seek help immediately to avoid prolonged abuse. I wish I did not learn about this. I learned through experience what malignant narcissism is. I had a narcissistic mother, which led to easy connections with narcissists, a trauma bond. Over the span of 2 decades, 3 malignant narcissists tried to ruin my life with coordinated, deliberate acts of bullying and abuse. These were work relationships, but the abuse was in and out of the workplace. Below is the description of malignant narcissism. Story 16. While randomly searching the internet, being the horror fan I am, I browsed some torture methods online, and there are a lot. Firstly, there is the spider method. Surprisingly, this does not include arachnids, but instead, it's a contraption that latches onto a female's breasts and rips them off. Second, I forgot the name, but it includes having your backside decimated on a triangle-like thing that goes up until the subject is in a world of pain and suffering. The third is similar to waterboarding. Basically, a subject has water poured on them, and then while confined, they have a bag tied to their head, while also having water dumped on their head. I believe it's called something like the submarine or something. Story 17. Once one nuke is fired, there's 1,000 nukes firing back. A lot are already at the ready, and a lot can be launched within 60 seconds. Then the Earth will be wiped clean, and everything and everyone will be dead within 27 minutes. It'll be pointless even trying to get into a bomb shelter because that ain't gonna do crap. And there wouldn't be anything left apart from nuclear winter, which will just kill anything that is left, and you will just drag out the suffering until you die. I'm already prepared to say one last love and goodbye to my people. And some I have already told them in the case of this happening, to know that I love them, and I'll miss living in a world with them. Story 18. The USA has the best military. It has more aircraft carriers than the world combined, and the Air Force, the only country that has a sixth-gen aircraft capable of bombing anywhere in the world and returning, missiles with almost 100% accuracy, and aircraft that are flown by artificial intelligence. The only downside is that it's only as good as the best person it's fought. With the same skill of a person with 3,000 hours in flight experience, it made one of the best aircraft because of fear and created an even better one because they thought the Russians caught up, but they didn't, and just made another for fun and distribution for NATO. They control the F-35 via a code only the USA knows because the aircraft they gave is so powerful. It's updated every use. And it doesn't matter if their $80 million jet crashed because they probably didn't need it and could just launch missiles from a couple hundred miles away on a boat, submarines with nukes on them, fighter jets with nukes on them, tanks that are protected by the same material of nukes, inventor of nukes, which is pretty terrifying because our gas is kind of expensive. Story 19. There is a black hole called Phoenix A, and it is estimated to be 100 billion times the mass of our sun, comparable to the mass of an entire galaxy. Its event horizon is 590 billion kilometers wide, or more than 100 times the distance from the sun to Pluto, or about 6.25% of a light year wide. To get a visualization of how big that is on a human scale, let's shrink our solar system by 1 trillion times. The sun would be 1 millimeter wide, and Pluto would be a little more than 5 meters away, and that black hole would be 590 meters wide. For reference, Alpha Centauri would be about 40 kilometers away at that scale. Story 20. The first known human cannibal was a Neanderthal, whose victims' 100,000-year-old bones were discovered in Moula-Guercy, a cave in France. There have been sites where the act has occurred involving the cannibalism of children, leading some to speculate the act was not just done for food, but that it was done as a warning to rivals. Some anthropologists suggest that cannibalism was common in human societies as early as the Paleolithic. To this day, only a few countries have laws which explicitly criminalize the practice of cannibalism, and the act can still be found in isolated regions of 5 different countries. Story 21. There are several forms a body can decompose after you breathe for the last time. The most common is putrefaction, rotting. It starts when bacteria inside you start eating you up when they stop receiving food. Mummification is most famous because of ancient Egypt. Some Japanese monks mummified themselves through a ritual consisting of eating tree bark and drinking water from a specific water spring. Little they knew that the water was rich in arsenic, so they slowly poisoned themselves, so they killed all bacteria inside them as well. So no putrefaction was possible, and their bodies dried up in a meditation position. Devout Buddhists believe they're still alive, reducing their body functions near to zero. This practice is now forbidden in Japan. These mummifications are artificial, but one of the rarest mummification cases is in Guanajuato, Mexico. Their graveyard is so small that a perpetuity quote has to be paid. If the quote is not paid, the body is exhumed and cremated. But some of the bodies are found mummified. The causes are unknown because less than 1% of the bodies are mummified. Saponification may be the rarest one, and since I'm not a chemist, the hardest to explain. All bodies have fat. Some have more fat than others. This fat, if the conditions are adequate, starts a process called hydrolysis. This makes your body fat to transform into soap. It is so rare that it is considered anomalous when it happens to a previously living body. Story 22. We don't really know reality. We only know our perception of reality. The sky isn't really blue. The gases in our atmosphere scatter the shorter wavelength frequencies of the visible light spectrum, that is, blue, indigo, and violet. Yet, we only see blue. The rest are still there. We just don't see it. There is a lot we don't see. There is a lot we don't hear. There is a lot we cannot perceive. Just imagine what else is out there, or rather, inside your house with you right now, perhaps dangling off the hairs over your forehead as you read this, that you can't see, or hear, or feel. When we consume psychoactive, hallucinogenic substances, our perception of reality is distorted. The 5 senses are inadequate for describing the experience because we are able to perceive differently from what languages and, by extension, our own minds have been developed to describe. There is a great, overarching blackness, a mystery of the universe that you cannot know. We're all just walking around in the dark, unaware of everything. Also, a baculum is a bone that is absent in humans but present in other mammals. The blue whale is the largest animal species alive on Earth. They have baculums. Story 23. Sure, here are a few facts that some people might find creepy. The body farm. There's a research facility in Tennessee, often referred to as the body farm, where human decomposition is studied. Donated bodies are left outside in various conditions to observe how they break down over time. This research helps in forensic investigations. Coffin birth. In rare cases, if a pregnant woman passes away and her body decomposes, gases can build up and force a fetus out in an event called post-mortem fetal extrusion, or coffin birth. Brain eating. Amoebas. Naglaria fowleri is a type of amoeba that lives in warm, fresh water and can cause a lethal brain infection if it enters the body through the nose. Caterpillar fungus. The cordyceps. Fungus infects insects like caterpillars, takes over their bodies, and eventually kills them. After the host dies, the fungus sprouts from the body to reproduce. This zombie fungus was the inspiration for the infected in the game The Last of Us. Doll's eyes. Plant the Actia pachypoda, or doll's eyes plant, gets its name from its white berries with a black dot, making them look like creepy doll's eyes. The plant is highly toxic to humans and can cause a variety of symptoms, including cardiac arrest. Human mites. Demodex mites live on human skin, particularly on the face. These microscopic creatures are mostly harmless, and most people don't even realize they have them. Remember, while these facts might sound a bit unsettling, they are all part of the fascinating and diverse world of science and nature. Story 24. There is absolutely no proof that anyone or anything but your own consciousness exists or ever existed. This includes anyone you know, your friends, your family, your loved ones, everything you think exists, even your own body, and everything you ever did. And even taking a few moments actively thinking, this is happening, doesn't change anything, because the second the moment is over, you can't prove that it really happened and isn't some false memory you just constructed in maybe the only moment your mind actually exists.